Welcome everyone to the Mindful Parenting webinar. Today we have a special guest, another student from the National University of Singapore. Her name is Alicia too. And she had gone through maladaptive coping habits, which she will be sharing today with us, and how mindfulness has impacted her life and how it has helped her. So before we go there, I'd like to also welcome Frank Singham and Mei Cheng, my co-hosts for today, although they won't be appearing just yet, as I'm going to be leading you in a short mindfulness practice just to get all of you to be present, both in body and mind. And also to relax how you're feeling right now, tuning to your body, noticing how your body is feeling, and also what the weather up there is in the mind. Okay, so everyone, do sit back. Find yourself a comfortable position to be in. Just check in with your shoulders right now. How do they feel? Are they relaxed or are they rather tense? So if they're feeling tense, perhaps you may want to just pull your shoulders back and just rotate them forward and be completely in tune with how the muscles are moving. So do this about 3 times. And now change direction. I can hear some little small crackling sound. Yeah, I don't know about you. And now just rotate your shoulders, first tilting your head to one side. And do a very gentle head rotation. And changing direction after about 2 rotations. And coming back to the center. Good. I'd just like you to tune into your body right now without closing your eyes first and just noticing how your body feels. Is the body feeling relaxed, feeling energized, or feeling a little tense, feeling a little fatigue, tired, whatever that word may be for you to describe how your body feels. And how about your mind? How does your mind feel? Okay, so now just closing your eyes and take 3 beautiful deep breaths. And now letting go your breath and just tuning into the body and just noticing whatever feelings that may be present. Getting to know the feeling. And if there are any body sensations, the sensation could be tension, tightness, tingling, or simply just feeling relaxed. And be aware of any emotions that may be present as well. It could be nervousness, irritation, annoyance, or even a sense of injustice. If you've just come out of a discussion feeling that way, that feeling and emotion might still be present. Feeling unfair. And now letting go of these feelings, meaning leaving them alone while they are still present. And just dropping your focus onto your feet, noticing your feet on the ground and how the ground feels under your feet. or your footwear if your feet are in shoes or sandals. Sense into your toes. Spread your toes open and feeling the gaps between your toes and relaxing them. Now sense the bum on the chair and noticing the surface under your bum. Is the surface hard, soft? And notice which parts of your bum are really felt against the surface. And you may notice some parts of the back of your thighs are also in contact with the surface. Notice where your hands are now. And are your fingers open up or are they closed up? And you may wish to open them and placing them on the thighs or wherever that your hands are happier to be. And sensing to your shoulders. Feel free to gently move your shoulders slightly and release any tension that could be present in the shoulders. Tuning into the abdomen. And sense into your abdomen if your abdomen is relaxed or if there is any tightness, a knot, or tension in the abdomen. Just breathe into it. And now be aware of your facial expression, your jaw, your cheeks, the forehead, and relax your face. And while you were scanning the different parts of your body, you had let go of the feeling or emotion you earlier felt. And now just dropping back into the breath. Wherever you feel your breath is, focus on that part of the body. And notice if the emotion is still present, the one that you felt earlier. And if it is there a change in intensity? Now sense into your mind, and what is the weather up there now in the mind? Is it clearer, more calm? And now just drop back into the breath and just appreciate the presence of this beautiful breath. If this is the moment that we only have 10 breaths left to breathe, what would be really the thing that matters? Would all the arguments and conflicts really matter anymore? Or would it be just having this moment feeling peaceful? Feeling contented with life? Feeling at ease? So if this is the moment we can feel at ease and at peace, why not live your life feeling these kind of moments more? And now, focusing on 3 more breaths. And open your eyes. So what if our parenting approach can be more at ease, feeling a sense of peace and contentment? Would that be nice? So that's the whole point of doing these practices, is to be able to take this kind of moment that we feel more peaceful and calm into as many things as we do in life, so we can feel the happiness and joy in being in every moment. So now it gives me great pleasure to invite our student guest speaker. She's a second-year geography student at NUS, and she had completed the course, which is called the Undefeated Mind at NUS last semester when I was teaching there. So I'm very proud of her for coming out to share this presentation with you, as it was one that was done in class. And it is showcasing her own vulnerability. Many young people or even older people don't like to show their vulnerability. So this is indeed admirable and very courageous of her. So over to you, Alicia. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Angie. Hi, I would like to share today about my past experiences of having to cope with stress in childhood and in school, and how in response to this stress, I developed a somewhat maladaptive coping mechanism to deal with it. As well as like, oh, sorry, I realized I didn't share my slides. Okay, there we go. Okay, before I talk about that, I would like to share with you a thought experiment posed by the famous philosopher, Robert Nozick. Okay, the gist of this is like, it is like this. Imagine a machine that could continually give you any happy or pleasurable dream that you could ever want. This machine could stimulate your brain to have experiences that feel as realistic as real life. You will be happy and you will be healthy. There will be no physical side effects, except for the fact that you will live out the rest of your life hooked up to that machine, experiencing things just like in real life. Except those experiences will always be positive. There will not be a single negative experience. You can just think to yourself, if there are no side effects, would you want to be plugged into that machine? Most people would answer no, they don't want to be plugged into that machine. It could be that because they have very real things that they want to accomplish, or that perhaps they have real people in the real world that they do not want to leave behind. Despite being offered the chance to live in infinite happiness and no suffering at all, deep down we still feel like there could be something wrong with that offer. Well, most of my childhood, I felt like I spent in an experience machine which was in my mind. Because I was trying so hard to get away from the stress from school, I experienced a sort of maladaptive daydreaming, which took up most of my life. It was a form of escapism from my real life. It's sort of like having a portable TV in my head. I can choose whatever channel I want to watch. I can replay my favorite scenes over and over and over again, but I can't turn it off. There have been some studies done on it, but the simplified definition is this. Firstly, there is a very intentional focus on daydreaming, which typically arises from wanting to escape trauma or to escape from depression. And these daydreams can last for hours at its maximum. I usually spend hours world building, making everything in my dream world perfect, down to the minute details. It made me happy. However, there were drawbacks as well. I usually had an intense compulsion to go back into the dream, at the expense of my relationships and schoolwork. I didn't need friends because I invented people to talk to in my head. Even when I was with friends and family, I would be physically there but not present. It got to the point that even my parents noticed that I was emotionally distant. I tried to explain that this action was what made me feel happy, even in a time of like feeling hopelessness. But I guess it's really difficult both for me to explain and for them to understand exactly why I was so reliant on this kind of coping mechanism. Secondly, these daydreams mimic an addiction. To me, it was a little bit like having a drug high. I had to feed that addiction even when I was around other people or when I was doing other things. When I was younger, the daydreams were so vivid. Sometimes I don't even see what's in front of me. My mind just can't pay attention to my surroundings. Twice, I almost got knocked down by a car just down the road from my own house. I spent so much time in the daydreams that they kind of imprinted on me. Even during school exams, they continued like a chanting in my head. But regardless of such problems, like a drug addict, I needed my fix. I was fully aware that these daydreams aren't real. I knew that with every high, there was an equal low. Once in a while, I would have the crushing realization that I would never have the things that I dreamt up. I would never become the person that I was imagining. And those negative thoughts would just start the daydreams right back up. It was kind of like a very vicious cycle. Thirdly, another part of the severe daydreaming is the need for repetitive actions to sustain my concentration on the dream. I spent a lot of time walking to help me think about my dreams. And even when I was stuck at home, I would just walk from the front of the house to the back and then back to the front again. Even during family dinner, I could get the urge to just get up and walk around. My mother was very affected by my constant pacing. I still remember when she finally snapped. That day, I got up from the dining table and paced into my room, walking in a tiny circle. I didn't realize that my mother had followed me. She grabbed me by the arm, looked me in the eyes, and said, "Let's go see a psychologist." I still remember the look of pure terror and worry on her face, and it was really heartbreaking. It was then that I realized that my daydreaming was a problem not only for me, but the people around me. It was with maturity and during this mindfulness program that I was able to explain to myself some of the things that was going through my head back then. I'm not saying that the daydreaming went away because they didn't. Even today, whenever I'm walking and commuting, I'm still thinking about my daydreams. It's just not as intrusive anymore. I recognize that this was and still is an addiction problem. I know that it was the way that I had conditioned myself to act. And whenever something negative happened, I would escape into my daydreaming. Going through mindfulness, it made me think about things like, why did I have to resort to such intrusive daydreaming in the first place? One of the main lessons that benefited me was learning to be aware of what I was feeling, because I recognized that the daydreams was a form of escapism. That would mean that, bottom line, I was not happy. But I wasn't very aware of such feelings and had a lot of difficulty vocalizing them. So I began to monitor my own emotions. I realized that before almost every daydream, I felt emotions such as loneliness, dissatisfaction, and unhappiness, basically unhappiness with myself. I realized that I had a lot of self-defeating thoughts between each cycle of daydreaming. Sometimes I even blamed myself for daydreaming. I felt a lot of guilt before and after the daydreams, and was basically very self-conscious whenever my parents or any of my friends brought up my pacing. I had a lot of thoughts on how I should be better, how I could have learned like an extra skill if I didn't waste all my time, and so on and so forth. All of these negative emotions and thoughts were self-inflicted though. Nobody has ever said these things to me. It was just my insecure mind throwing thoughts at myself. At the root cause, this addiction to unreal experiences was because of my self-loathing and fear of not living up to expectations, both in school and as a person. I also realized that without correcting these self-defeating thoughts, I would never be satisfied with living in the present. And this vicious cycle would just continue on. The only way I can fully remove this addiction is by making my life a more satisfying one to live in. These are some of my main takeaways that I can apply to this problem and my life in general. First of all, I had to be non-judgmental of myself. The daydreamings is not inherently bad. They make good entertainment at times when I have nothing to do. I realized that there was no point in beating myself about the daydreams. Maybe it's not so normal, but it's just the way I grew up. If I look at it in a positive light, perhaps it is because of these daydreams that I enjoy doing art so much. This non-judgment applies to being non-judging of other people as well. This includes having more empathy for my parents. I realized that as a child, we tend to hold our parents to a very unfair standard. We have the expectation that they know everything, or maybe that they remember every single little thing that we tell them. However, with age, it is important to remember that parents are human too. They make mistakes, and we shouldn't hold grudges against them, especially if it's unwarranted. Only by accepting that fact can we as children form deeper bonds with our parents. Secondly, I can learn to accept the good and the bad things in life. I thought that I could help myself accept by listing what I really love in my life and feeling gratitude for all these things. First of all would definitely be my parents. My relationship with my parents has greatly improved over the years, and for the first time ever, I'm able to speak to them like I would a close friend. Another main thing is being in NUS. I really like the amount of autonomy that I have here, and I like what I'm studying. I'm also thankful for being surrounded by people who genuinely care for me and grow with me. I realized that there are many things that I can be grateful for, and that I should learn how to accept it and say, this is enough for me. Then there's also accepting the bad stuff in life. I came to realize that no person can do everything, and that's okay. There are things that don't go the way I want them to. I can accept that fact. I came to realize that a large part about self-love is learning to accept my flaws. Harping on it will not improve on those flaws. I can accept that my maladaptive coping mechanisms still continue today, and that it might take a very long time for it to go away. Returning to the thought experiment from before, if I was offered a life with infinite happiness and no suffering at all, perhaps once I would have said yes, but now I'm not so sure. Suffering and pain temper us. It makes us mature and grow as a person. One might be able to say that it can even make life more worth living if you could learn how to accept the pain and move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. That was a very heartfelt presentation that you made, and very, very brave of you and courageous of you to be presenting it. So I'd like to invite both my co-hosts to join us, Frank as well as May. And parents out there, if you have a question, do feel free to post them. So I'm just going to start with one question, which is Alicia, at which point during the 12-week program at the uni that you started to accept yourself and find more peace with who you are?
It was actually quite late into the program because I kept, having those memories of all these bad things happening, and you tend to think like I keep harping on them, like all these bad things happen. But it was only after like maybe 3/4 in, a long time in, that I started to realize that yeah, these things happen, but there's really no point in dragging it out and thinking about it repeatedly.
And I'd like to invite you to share as to how comfortable were you actually when you were in the class over those weeks? Because when we were doing the practice, it wasn't always easy for you.
Comfortable. It also took quite a while for me to get comfortable with the practices, because I think I have a very anxious like body tics. So especially meditation is not easy, because then I'll start to scratch at my fingers or like scratch at myself. And probably it was about like halfway when I started to be able to like sit through the whole meditation without flinching. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say to the parents out there, some of you do bring your kids to join in the courses, including mindfulness-based stress reduction. And I'd like to suggest that if your children are prepared to attend, is to let them attend on their own instead of you joining with them into the same program, because it gives them the space and the ability to just be themselves without feeling like they need to meet your expectations, even coming to the course. And perhaps, Alicia, you may want to comment on that, that what if your parent had been in the same classroom as you during the course? How would it have been for you? Would it have been easier, or do you think you would have felt differently?
About the attending together with a parent, well, if I was younger, I would definitely say that it's really way too awkward, and I might be like too uncomfortable thinking about the fact that I'm attending with a parent rather than focusing on the what was being taught. But well, for me, with age, I think I wouldn't mind attending with my parent now.
Okay, thank you. May, do you have anything that you'd like to add or have a question for Alicia?
Yeah, I have a question for Alicia. Thank you so much for so candidly sharing your experience. I'm so sorry that you underwent, such stress and anxiety when you were younger. Looking back, how could the school, like your teachers or your friends, could have helped you better in overcoming the anxiety and stress that you experienced?
How, I guess, okay, especially in like our society nowadays, there's a really huge impetus to strive for excellence in studies, especially in younger children, and grades matter a lot. And it was only partway through that my parents actually began to encourage like, oh, it doesn't really matter what school you go to, or really like even if you don't achieve the best like the best results, that's okay. And I think that is really what every child wants to hear. It really is like what every child wants to hear, to be able to hear affirmation, to be able to hear like acceptance, so that they don't have that pressure on themselves that like I wouldn't be happy until like my parents are happy, for example. And, oh,
Thank
there
you.
was a question.
Yes, there is a question there. Would you like to take that before Frank?
Sure.
Joins
Well,
in?
when I was, especially, I think it's started from like primary school, like really young childhood. Like my parents also like started to say that, oh, if you get like all A's, then you can get stuff. They'll buy stuff. You know, that a lot of parents use that kind of incentive to get you to study. I'm not saying that it's bad, but I think some children might take it the wrong way, and they start to think that, oh, that means any other grade is not really acceptable. So when I was a child, I grew up with the expectation that I have to do like well. I have to do well over social life, over, you know, having fun. And that was my childhood actually, like between straight from school to home and then home to school. Like I didn't really have much social life. But yeah.
Thank you. Frank.
Thank you, Angie, and thank you again, Alicia. Kudos to you for being here and sharing your journey. Personally, I think you have won half your battles already, you know, by just being upfront here and sharing it with us. And nothing is better than being more self-aware of our issues. And earlier we start that, the earlier the journey to try and resolve them, you know. And so you're on the way, dear. You know, don't worry about that. But the thing I would like to ask you is, so now you have learned something from this, right? I mean, having been through the mindfulness course, you have learned a few things that's going to help you get out of this, shall I say, disassociation with yourself, right? And also with people around you. The question I have for you really is, how do you reach out to those who may still be similarly affected? Right now, there are children maybe listening to you, or parents who have children who are going through what you're going through. What would be your advice to them to how to correct this behavior once they realize that they're doing this, right? Daydreaming a lot, not being in the moment, without having to attend a mindfulness course. That's a proviso, right? If you never had to attend one, what would be your advice to them about how they can then correct themselves, how they can work with their parents to correct themselves? Could you help us understand that a bit?
Okay, to be frank, correcting it, I am not that certain, because I don't think there is like a real solution, like a hard and fast rule to it. But especially in my case, perhaps what I would have appreciated at the time would be more social interaction, because, well, at least for me, like daydreaming and engaging myself was it's a very avoidant way of dealing with perceived tension and stress. So I withdrew, and perhaps especially for younger children who are more impressed in, like, they are still developing, perhaps some sort of outreach towards them, it would help. Like it could be very simple interaction, like talking to them about things that they enjoy.
Alicia, would you say that you didn't have much of a social, you didn't have much of an opportunity to be socializing with other students, or you chose not to?
I think it's a little bit of both, because I mean, if you're the more quiet and introverted kind of person, you both try to like separate yourself from like cliques in school, and you're also not included in cliques in school. So it's a double-edged sword.
Now, I noticed you went to a girls' school. Do you think it would have been different or would have been actually healthier for you if you had gone to more of a mixed school?
I have no idea what I have no idea what studying in you know, as a secondary school student, how studying in a mixed school would be like. But I guess that there would be like getting getting more familiarity with like the opposite gender, and that's in itself, it's very good for your social skills. It would definitely help with your social skills.
Okay. How would your parents have helped you or supported you better now that you have 2020 hindsight?
Perhaps if they were more like forthcoming about, you know, accepting that whatever you choose to do in life is okay, because they have taken on that perspective, especially with my, like, yeah, I have a younger sister. So, you know, it changed, the perspective has changed from you have to excel in school to be able to succeed in life, to if you're happy with what you're doing, just go for it. You know, if that perspective had come on, I think it would definitely have been a lot useful to me, a lot more useful.
Thank you. There are a couple of questions on the screen. If you'd like to look at the Q&A section. And so you might want to just give a few moments of contemplation on those before we put you on the spot. In the meantime, would May like to chime in on any tips you'd like to provide parents in terms of how protective or less protective parents can be to help support the growth of their children? As a former school principal, you must have had quite a few occasions where you came across parents who may be more protective than they need it to be.
Yeah, sometimes it's a very natural response on their part to just want to protect their children, especially when the child had done something wrong. But if we can help them to see the larger picture of, you really want your child to grow up to be a better person, right, with values and the motivation, the self-motivation to want to do well, they will, you know, accept that. And I think in terms of looking at a child, is it the grade that matters so much, yeah, or the well-being of the child? Because we know that the system itself is quite stressful, the whole society, you know, there's so much to do and there's so much competition. So our children, like, you know, even what Alicia said, like when you went to school, you already felt the anxiety to want to meet some expectations. So they already feel stress. So it's important that at home that we can not focus so much on the product or the outcome as in the results, but really helping and empower the child by looking at effort. So we want to encourage our child to, okay, maybe you want to look at have you put in enough effort or not? That's an area that they can work on. Okay, maybe you want to put in more effort. The other area is the focus. Have you been attentive? Can you sit down and focus well? So let's look at how to, you know, remove the distraction and how to be more focused. And thirdly is the strategies, right? So we can, you know, encourage our children to ask the teachers how to solve, you know, certain maths problem, what is the strategies to use. And that, I think by focusing on effort, focus, attention, and strategy, these are things that children can work on. Then we are empowering them rather than saying that, you know, wow, you didn't do well. So the blaming and the criticism really don't help them, all right? At some point, we want to look at just look for something positive to give feedback and to encourage. And that can help them with their self-esteem, the confidence, and the motivation to want to try, all right? So that's my suggestion here.
Thank you. Alicia, before I have you come back in to answer the questions live, Frank, would you like to add anything here in terms of some tips for parents to be more accepting of their children and less focused on grades?
Yeah, thank you. On the protective factors, I think it's a double-edged sword. Protective factors actually can be healthy for the kid because we want to provide a safe environment for them to be able to operate, to explore, to understand themselves a little bit more, right? But when you become protective like a helicopter mom or a lion dad, then it becomes harmful. So there is a spectrum in being protective, and we need to know, we need to engage in that part of the spectrum that is more healthy for the kid in terms of the kid's development. And I think that is very, very, very useful. So let's look at the protective factors amongst ourselves. But I would like to also offer this. I'd like to ask a question to the parents. How many parents out there really do share some of the challenges that they are facing in their own lives, and especially in the offices and in the work, right? How much challenges are they facing? What kind of challenges are they facing, and how are they coping? You know, what are the parents' insights about the kind of challenges that they are facing in their own lives? Because I think the children can learn from this. Is like storytelling, right? There's nothing better for a child than telling them a story. Why not a story from you as a parent about how was your life in the early days, and not to try and lecture the kid, but how is it that you cope with some of the challenges that you had, and also how you're coping with some of the challenges that you have today. And I think these stories, when you tell them, will generate questions. And the child, while listening to all this, may ask a question that is more related to them. So I think this way of sharing with the children about what's happening in your own lives, with your relationships, with your jobs, I think can be useful. Something to consider.
Thank you, Frank. One of the things I believe in sharing with my children is daring to be different. That we don't have to follow the norm and a pathway that's set by so-called the society. And remember, we are part of the society. So if we can encourage our children to find their own pathway and to find joy in what they do, especially in the discovery of knowledge and learning, then going to school is part of that journey that they will find exciting, that they have this sense of curiosity to learn about science and how the magic of mathematics, everything adds together. It's such a perfect science. And learning about geography, like what Alicia is now majoring in. So we don't all have to be good in math and science, and we don't all have to be good in all subjects. It's finding what their talents are, where their strengths are, and their interests in, and harness that, so that their journey of growing up becomes exciting, becomes a memorable childhood for them. And that's what I wanted for my kids, that when they look back on their school days, they can actually say, I really enjoyed going to school. So I hope you will also help your children have that memorable journey, because after all, they only have one childhood. So back to you, Alicia. So some of the questions have been posed here. Did any of your school counselors manage to notice your difficulties, or did they brush you off?
About the school counselors, I actually did not open up about the daydreaming itself, but I was referred to a school counselor on basis like that I was quite depressive. But because I was so like reluctant to share on like what I was going through, because to me this at the time especially, it was quite shameful, the daydream. So I didn't share, and the school counselor's response was to tell me, I can't help you if you don't want to tell me anything. And honestly, I think that it is quite natural to have that kind of response, especially to a child who's like withdrawing or refusing to talk about it. But I think it is a very, very harmful thing to say, especially if it is your child, because children, especially if they withdraw, if they are response to situations, to stressful situations, especially if you're confronting them on like, oh, what's going on? If their response is to withdraw, it's because they're afraid to enclose that kind of information. They feel really, really vulnerable. And by accusing them, saying that I can't do anything to help you, or this is your fault because you don't want to say anything, you're actually pushing them away. So especially if the child's response is the avoidant type, I think it is a very normal human response to say that, oh, you don't want to tell me anything? Okay, I don't want to talk to you either. But it is very harmful for a child, actually.
That's a very good tip, Alicia. Would it have been better if the parent or counselor says, when you're ready to talk, I will be here and come and see me again?
Yeah, because then that's where you start to build the trust. Because for us avoidant type people, where it's not intentional for us to, you know, be stoic and quiet when we're with people. It's just that we're not comfortable sharing. It's not intentional. We're not trying to be cold or anything.
So do you think that the environment of the classroom to the whole Undefeated Mind course was helpful, that you were given the space to share, and yet you didn't feel like you were forced to share, but it was always an open invitation to you?
Yes, actually, it's quite comfortable in the sense that we don't have the expectation, oh, by this time in the course you have to say something, or not really.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the next question here is, my son daydreams a lot too. I always wonder what he's thinking about. Could Alicia share a little bit about what's in your daydreams? Nothing too private.
Limited amount. But I mean, first of all, I would say I don't think it's anything harmful. Definitely, it's more of things that you're trying to build up your ego on the inside by telling yourself that maybe I'm like, he could be a superhero in his daydreams, for example. And these repeated scenarios, it builds up your self-esteem in not a very healthy way. But especially if the child is lacking that, like I was lacking that self-esteem, you find alternative ways to build it up. So it's definitely not anything bad.
Okay.
But yeah, they may be embarrassed to share about it, definitely.
Yeah, because it does reflect that, you know, he has certain self-esteem issues or nervousness about life. And so there is a lot of imagination involved. That's what daydreaming is about. I would dissuade the parent from asking your son all the time, what are you thinking? Because there's nothing more annoying to a male, especially, than to be asked what you're thinking about. So allow them to have their own adventures in their mind. And you have now heard from Alicia that there is nothing harmful in their daydreams. Who helped you, or what events that you think was the turning point in your road of overcoming difficulties?
The biggest turning points, I guess, was in late JC and in university especially. That was when I started having a lot more like autonomy, and I had a lot more like choice to do and pursue what I wanted to pursue. And I think it was really only then that I felt like I have control over my life, and I don't have to resort to these external factors to try to give myself feel in control of my life. And I think it would be nice if you could let your child have control over their life from a younger point. Because I mean, it is their life, and you feel good when you make decisions for yourself.
Thank you. That was a very good point to make. Okay, so another question here is this related to the generation in terms of daydreaming, or is it normal for kids under stress to feel it?
I don't think all people resort to the same the same methods
Yeah.
to deal with stress, and that's why we have people like undergoing mental illness, or they resort to more harmful methods. I don't think everybody has the same solutions for stress.
Thank you, Alicia. So while you read the other question here, I'll answer one here that was sent to me in private. Do you think girls' school is more stressful than mixed schools? Well, I went to a girls' school. In fact, I grew up in Malaysia. I went to a primary school that was all girls, and I went to secondary school that was all girls. And I think it's actually quite an abnormal environment. I remember that that I looked around and I thought, my gosh, you know, it's like, this is just not normal. And I remember joining clubs that had an opportunity to meet boys because I wasn't interested in girls. And sadly, then there were girls interested in other girls because there was no other opposite gender students around. And it's very normal for girls to be interested in boys and boys interested in girls. So if we put them in a very artificial environment where we girls have to even act as boys in drama, in plays, and when we do dance, one of us had to pretend to be the guy and doing the guy's performance. It's really, I don't believe it's healthy. So I think it's important to educate our girls about looking after their body, because this is really important to have self-respect of the body. So therefore, you're not going to let somebody else touch your body, whether it's a boy or a girl touching the body is the same thing. Because anyone touching our body without permission is a violation. And that is something that should be taught. And I would say teach to boys as well, because if you violate a girl, and especially if the girl is 14 and below and 16 and below, you will get in trouble with the law. And I'm seeing a case right now that a boy who had an episode with a girl some years back may actually end up, you know, getting in trouble. And sometimes these things come back and haunt you years later. So these are really important education to talk about sex very openly and not to try to hide it or put it under the carpet, because the reality is these things exist. They watch it on television. So it's really important for them to know how to safeguard their body, because you're also safeguarding their minds. Right. So one last question here from a parent, I think. What strategies do you use now to manage the impulse of daydreaming?
Well, for me, if you're busy, you might not be able to do these things, but I think that the most comfortable way is that when you have the impulse to have these, you know, fake experiences, why don't you go and do something that you like to do? So if I find myself like getting distracted when I study, and then I start to have these daydreaming, I take it that, oh, I can't concentrate, I stop, I take a short break to do something that I like. So it's not, you know, scolding yourself saying that, oh, this is not good, or you should not be doing this, but, you know, kind of phasing it out a little in a more pleasant way.
Thank you, Alicia. That is indeed a very generous act on your part to be sharing your journey, and something so vulnerable for you to be opening up to hundreds of people out there, including on Facebook where it's streamed live. So thank you once again. And before we end the session, I'd like to invite May and Frank to provide your closing words. So whoever would like to go first.
May.
Okay, Frank.
I hear this quite a bit about the strawberry generation, the way we label the new young generation, right? Folks like Alicia and those who came before her, the young folks, have shown me that they are very good at taking ownership of their lives. And they're very good at being very responsible and accountable to themselves. They have gone beyond their scope of responsibility and ownership to try and do something that they know is not going well for them. And they want to take action so that they have better control over life. So I think we should stop labeling this generation. I think they are in good hands. They are in good hands with themselves. And we should be very grateful that we are hearing from folks like Alicia. I also like to say this to the parents that as the kids grow up, they pick up things, they pick up knowledge issues as they grow up. And they're doing this all on their own, even if they're not told otherwise. And they're also picking up things regarding values, right? And then they pack up and they put some stories behind this knowledge, information, and values, and then they stack it away in their ideal world. And then that ideal world becomes the place where they go and stay in most of the time. And this is sometimes the world that maybe Alicia finds herself in, a dream world, right? This is where everything is so nice for me. When I get up in the morning, everything is so great for me. And I think if parents are really into their kids and really want to see what the kids are like, then you spend time, you'll be able to see these trends, that they're not present here or they're not present there, a bit disassociated here, and be very interested in figuring out what you have to do for them. So for the kids, for them to be able to open up, the kids need to have a trusted person, someone they can actually go to and talk about these things. They need to have somebody in the household who is able to share and be very upfront with even their mistakes and the way they have done things wrongly. So this trusted person can go to get some, to confide in them, to help them, talk to them about, hey, why am I doing this thing? Because they know that it's not going well for them. Like for Alicia, she realizes that. She realized it was not going well for her. And so she had to find the answer for herself. So I think in the household, very important for parents, again, I will emphasize this, spend time with your kids, be the trusted person there for them, monitor how they are growing up, where they are picking up habits which may not be healthy for them in the long run. Yeah.
Thank you, Frank. That was really well put. May, over to you.
Okay. I heard from Alicia just now, you mentioned like how important it is to have some control in your life. And that's when you flourish, when you can make decisions for yourself, right? So I believe like to the parents, like we hope that from young, we can even start giving our younger children some control by giving them options that they can decide and choose, these options are acceptable to us. And, they can start from young by choosing the options. And as they grow older, don't decide on everything for them. Give them some chances to make some decisions, like, the choice of CCA, like even the course of study, because it is their life and not, and their dreams to fulfill, not ours, not our dreams. Yeah. Okay, so I think to have a sense of control is very important. That's empowering to the young people. Thank you.
Thank you, May. That was excellent. So I'm going to try to just bring in two questions that have come into my concluding words here. One is that my two daughters often fight with each other. Any parental tips? I would like you to just check as to whether they do fight when you're not around or they only fight when you're around, because sometimes they fight because they are inviting your attention. So when I realized that that was part of what was going on when my two kids had an argument or were so-called fighting, I would just walk away and let them figure it out themselves. And when they realized that there was no more spectator or referee, they actually stopped on their own. So it is a different response to have the confidence to let go. And sometimes you just got to try it to see if that works. And if there were much deeper issues, then please bring them in to see a counselor and help them resolve some of their deeper issues. Sometimes it's just to do with jealousy as well, and that's why they fight in front of parents. Another one here is about conflict between the spouses. Well, it is highly emotionally damaging, psychologically damaging to kids when spouses fight in front of each other. So it's really important for that not to happen. It might be better to just let one parent stress the kids and you don't add the stress on it by having the argument. And if you could help bring him in to talk to Frank on trying to harmonize your parenting strategies, that would be something very kind to your children to do, because nothing is more stressful than having parents having fights in front of the children. So I would like to invite all of you to consider other options when the current way of parenting doesn't quite seem to be effective. It used to be effective, but maybe no longer effective as your kids are growing up and they are more brain developed. They're also getting more intelligent, more informed, more knowledgeable. And therefore our parenting strategies have to adapt to meet the new demands. This is like a customer that has become more sophisticated in their needs, and therefore we have to now develop services and products that would be much more in line with their new preferences and demands. So parenting is no different in that way. So don't sit on our laurels and say, well, it used to work, or it worked for someone else, it's got to work for me. We just have to constantly be creative and to sense what is it our kids are needing from us. And I would say the number one need they have from us is our approval. So if we can approve of what they do, that is really, really helpful, instead of setting our demands, setting our expectations on them. And I agree with Frank, they are hardly strawberries. This group of young people are knowledgeable. They are also much more educated than we probably were. And they also know they have options. So because they know they have options, they don't have to stay stuck in any situation that they're in. So support them. These are different times. So we also need to be parents of a different time. So have a lovely Sunday ahead of you and a great week. Happy parenting. Your kids are only young once. Take care. Bye.